when I did this, you can see down here, there were two of us that were doing this talk. I'm a developer, and the other Jason that was here with me was a designer. So we kind of had both. He's not here with me today, so I will be filling in both positions. I'm assuming you're a developer, right? Oh, a manager. Okay, well that makes things even more different. And since it's a BOF, I want to do. Well, we've only got one person, so where have we got our wand mic? Cool, because I think they're going to want everything on here for the recording, so we'll give that to you. All right. Like I said, it's a BOF, and I like to do my BOFs a little bit more of a discussion instead of a presentation. So to start off, you said you're a manager. What is it you're hoping to get out of this?
Well, first of all, my name is Grigory, so nice to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from eBay, and yeah, I'm managing 5 teams of software engineers.
How many people?
Around 40 overall.
Wow.
Yeah, and they are working with designers, and I'm looking how I can improve our processes.
Are all of those 40 people, are they co-located in one place, or are they distributed?
My 5 teams, 2 are in Berlin and 3 are in Serbia. So we are distributed.
Okay. All right. Very good. So are the designers and developers together in the same team, or is there like a managerial split? Like they're all under you, right? But do they also have like a dotted line somewhere else?
Yeah. So reporting line is split. So designers have their own design managers, but they are kind of embedded into our engineering teams. So each team get a dedicated designer, and they are all in one location.
Okay. Some of this may not completely apply, but we'll see. One of the things that we find is that when the designers are not embedded into the team, then it makes things, it just adds complications. But since your designers are embedded in the team, then it's broken down some of these things already. But we'll take a look. So the slides that I've got 45 slides. I am not planning on going through all of them. They were mostly for talking points. So like I said, Jason Brock is not here with us. He's a designer on the team that we were working on the Red Hat developer program with, and I was the not main, but I was the tech lead architect kind of person on the project. So I handled a lot of the technical aspect, and Jason did the design elements and whatnot. And of course, one of the things that we've always thought, right, developers and designers see people as different species sometimes, right? So the designers are way over there and they've got their own thing. Developers are over there, they've got their own thing and whatnot. But there's really not as much of a difference as what we think there is. And one of the things that we also find was interesting is that the common enemy for a lot of what you typically do in design and development are kind of your end users. I mean, they're the people that ultimately end up using your stuff, but at the same time, they're also the people impeding you from doing what you would like to do. However, there are a lot of commonalities that you find, and one of the 5 things that we talk about, we'll go through all 5 of them, but the first one is kind of that wall of the standard, we'll throw it over the wall kind of a approach. Like here's what we want to do. We designed it. You guys go implement it. Or from the business, right? Here are your business things that we want you to implement or design or whatever, and we just toss it over, and you guys do whatever it is that you do over there, and you throw it back over the wall, and we say yes or no. All right. So that's probably the biggest one that we find, is that there's that impediment right there, which is mostly due to communication. And as soon as you tear down the wall, then, or when when you both agree that there's a wall and it needs to go away, then the wall just disappears because it's not actually there to begin with. It's just kind of something that we put up for ourselves anyway. Do you see that much in your team, since you've got most of your people co-located and embedded in the same teams, or not as much?
Well, I would say in general, designers and developers, they're not willing so much to communicate with each other. So some examples of problems I face, for example, the designer comes with different options of the design, and basically some takes more to implement, some takes less to implement. Mm-hmm. Well, developers not always are consulted, and some of them even enjoy the more complex design to implement because it becomes more challenging.
Sure.
And that all comes also about culture, assessing cost and value of product and fast delivery and all the trade-offs. But yeah.
Yep. Yep. You also find or one of the things that we've noticed, because they're different disciplines, and you don't find a whole lot of people that straddle the fence and do both design and development, or at least not very well. Neither one of them really has a good idea on the impact of some of the changes that are asked for, right? You can say, hey, we want that button over there to be blue or whatever, and you go, that sounds like it's an easy thing to fix, but it actually, you come down, the implementation is you've got to go change this here and that thing over there, and then you got to find the right color and all this stuff and all of that. Or from the developer to the designer aspect, right? Well, why don't you just move that thing like up over here? And one of the things you don't realize is, well, there's a reason why we put it over there. People aren't necessarily going to be looking for it over there, or that's not where you scan the page, or your eyes don't immediately go there anyway. There's actually some aspect of some psychology and how people react with devices and computers and whatnot that the developers typically don't get into as much as design does, or even like fonts, right? Why do we choose some fonts over other fonts? And there's actually studies about why fonts work better for different kinds of things that most of the developers, one, don't care about, two, don't get into. But that's one of those things that, as a designer, you need to understand as far as why. From a manager standpoint, and when we gave this before, I don't think I had many managers that attended it, or at least no one volunteered the info. So from your side, as someone that's managing teams of designers and developers, or a co-located group, what do you find most challenging with the communication aspect?
Well, the wall has different perspectives. So one is people do not collaborate. That's not our problem. So our problem is more designers. They do not have front-end knowledge to assess, for example, the complexity. And, well, front-end engineers, they're not so curious about, well, designs and UX and things like that. Right. In many cases, some engineers, of course, are, but not everyone. Yeah. So the challenge are basically what's the way in the middle, how we can make them the most efficient working together, right? So we could go one direction and basically try to learn both sides. We can ask them to work more in pairs. We can ask working them
Sure.
together. And I'm curious, what could you advise, basically?
What we found worked out really well, at least on our project. Working together in pairs worked out really well, especially because when you're paired up with someone, even someone that's not in your same disciplinary area, you end up actually creating human bonds with people. So instead of just you're the designer on my project, I understand that this is Joe, and Joe likes these 4 things, or we have these things in common. So you have a more human aspect to it than you would otherwise. So that's what we found has worked out really well, is you work together in pairs, or not, if not pairs, but in a smaller group of people.
But a bit maybe more precisely, so when you pair a designer and a front-end engineer, so they both, for example, do kind of pair programming on the front-end task and pair designing on the design task, or you do it differently?
We've done that. Um, to varying degrees of success. What typically ends up happening is that the designer goes and does his design stuff, and then we'll ask for feedback along the way instead of, wait, we mocked up the entire look and feel or page or whatever it was. Here, what do you think? But getting feedback along the way. So just a tighter feedback loop is usually what ends up working.
How would you scale it to multiple teams? So if you are working in one team, I assume it's more or less easy. You convince your colleagues working this way, but basically convincing 5 teams or more teams or the whole organization.
The short answer is I don't know.
Fair enough.
But yeah, scaling that. Without sitting down and actually putting more thought into it, I don't have an answer for it. Maybe it is something you just try out with a few people and just try a close-knit group of people and see how that works, and then just try and bring more people in, and it kind of grows organically. That might just be one way that ends up working out. What have you done that has helped kind of mitigate the whole wall aspect? Or are you just looking for a solution for something?
Well, to be honest, I'm at the beginning of my journey, so it's not the biggest pain point of our org unit. So basically, I'm just seeing it could be improved, it could be better.
Okay.
And yeah, that's why I'm here. So I honestly didn't try to work much on this yet.
Got it. Cool. Well then, given that info, I might just say forget the slides, or we'll see what happens. What is your biggest pain point that you found so far?
Well, the other one, maybe not specifically on developers, designers, collaboration, but for example, you mentioned that's a good way if you basically have designers sitting next to a team, basically assigned and paired to team. For example, how would you cross-balance capacity? So, for example, sometimes you have higher load in terms of front-end work, sometimes fewer, sometimes design is more usable, sometimes you're spending more testing. So for us, it's also, well, not ideal out of the box. You know, you have a person assigned, he knows the domain, he knows the team, they're working together. So today they have quite a few tasks, tomorrow they have quite a lot. So design intensivity grow. And you know, if we have an engineering team, so they can balance out because there are many developers, right? But designer is usually one or even one for a few teams. So
right.
How to keep this pairing and also compensate capacity if needed?
Yeah, that's not something that we've completely solved ourselves. We've got a similar problem where we have we've got 1.5-ish resources for graphic and layout design, and then two or three people for UX, and then a team of 6 or 7 or so developers. And what usually ends up happening is we end up doing a lot of the upfront UX work and design work, and then it comes over to the development team. So the UX is definitely front loaded with stuff that gets passed over to development. When we have done more focused sprints and whatnot, what's worked out really well is design and UX will come up even with just a basic idea, and then it'll get passed over and say, why don't you spike it or just do a basic wireframe implementation and see how that works out. That does help balance the load a little bit, and like I was saying earlier, it helps with the feedback loop, so you get information back sooner. It's worth a try.
I see. And maybe a random question, not totally related, but you are an engineer, right? So did you work on yourself to boost your UX and design knowledge outside of your core duties?
I did in previous jobs. I worked in smaller companies where we kind of had to do a lot of cross-discipline. So I picked up some of the design stuff in previous jobs, not to the same level or degree as a dedicated UX or graphic designer, but I have done some stuff on my own to help build out that knowledge. Unfortunately, not everyone has that that ability, or even the necessity to do that. It is one of those odd cross concerns that doesn't come up as much. And is it this? I'll get there. Yeah, here we go. This one, right? A lot of it is viewed this way, where you've got design kind of over here on this side. They're all the creative types, the ones that like to do all the weird, funky stuff with colors and design and images and whatnot. And then you've got your developers, which are more analytical and like to think things out and do all the logic stuff. But the reality of it is that while there are differences, there are also a fair amount of similarities in the way that things are done. For example, where is slide? This one, right? So you've seen ideas like the waterfall approach, or this is the development cycle, right? Which is basically this whole thing, plan, code, build, test, review, deploy, restart, do the whole thing all over again. For a designer, it's very similar. So you've got some sort of research that you need to do, some sort of design, and you go through this loop of review and design, review and design, review and design. We come up with something and someone says, no, that sucks, I need it purple instead of red. Or that image needs to be in the upper right? So you go back through and you do all of this stuff. Interestingly enough, it maps up very, very tightly to development as well. It's basically the same kinds of stuff, just in a slightly different layout. So there are definitely similarities there that you can find if people are willing to kind of bridge that wall, right? And like I said earlier, make that human connection to see where the similarities are instead of the differences. Being that a lot of your team, well, you've got teams that are co-located, and you've got teams that are also distributed, right?
Not really. So all the team members, they are co-located, but let's say
okay.
my org unit is distributed.
Got it. Do the org units work together, or not much?
Yeah, they have to collaborate because they work on common piece of product. So
okay.
Occasionally they hand over work from each other, or they integrate on a technical level.
Do you do what do you do for like team building or getting to know each other? Do you guys do anything like that?
Well, as we have just 2 locations, basically we travel, both are in Europe, so that's same time zone, so quite convenient. So we fixed it with visiting each other occasionally.
Yeah.
But I'm curious also about this picture. So
sure.
Maybe you can speak about how you implemented this in your collaboration. So was it connected into some iterative development with sprints? For example, did you plan or refine your backlog together with research tasks and implementation tasks? So was the planning done together? Because usually stuff that is currently designed, next step will be building this. So
right. There is some upfront planning that we did when it worked well, and that this is one of those things, right? When you've got all the time in the world, then things work out a lot better. When you get under the gun, then things are a lot more rushed and a little bit more hurried to do things. But if you've got the time up front to do some planning, what we did that worked out well for us, we did it at a quarter level. This quarter, these are the things that we want to tackle. And if you've got a week or whatever to take a look at that and see what you think initially is going to need need to be done, and then we can come back next week and gather ideas and thoughts and whatnot. That's when it's worked well. When it hasn't worked out so well, it's been back to you guys go design the thing and hand it over to us, and we'll figure it out. Unfortunately, at that point in time, you end up with the designs taken a week or 2 weeks or whatever, and then it gets passed over to development, and development looks at it and goes, this actually doesn't work because we can't move things around, or we can't modify the layout, or whatever it is at that point in time. And then you've got to go back to UX, and you've lost a week's worth of time or whatever, which is frustrating all around. But if you've got the time to do some of the initial spikes up front, it does help. But that's one of those things that if you've got time, great. If not, I don't really have a solution if you don't have the time to take a look at things up front.
And if I may ask, your product is also for engineers at Red Hat, right? So, I mean, you build tools or middleware, right, which will be used by developers.
Yes, this particular project that Jason and I worked on was not a middleware product, though. It was it's kind of the developer experience. If you go to developers.redhat.com, so it's a website that we were working on that surfaced a lot of the information about the middleware products, or Red Hat Linux, or OpenShift, or any of those products that we as a company offer.
So I'm curious, as also your target audience, basically, or your user personas are also developers.
Yes.
So do you somehow leverage this internally?
I think that does make a little bit of a difference. I don't know how much of a difference that makes, but I think it does make a little bit of a difference. Whereas with you guys being eBay, right, your target audience is pretty much literally everyone in the world, right? How do you break down personas when you go and look at scoping things out, or from a design aspect? Do you have personas for different stories, or what do you guys do? So like one of the things that we've done, you'll have like a developer persona that'll come in, and they'll be looking for specific things, right? A developer will want to know how to get started with something. They'll want to know where the documentation is. They'll want to know what it integrates with. A system administrator may not care about a lot of that stuff. They might want to know what's the SLA, how much does it cost, what hardware does it run on, and an architect might not care about any of that stuff. They just, does it work, and what can I use with it, right? So that there's all the different personas. Do you guys break that up at all at eBay for that, or is it all pretty much the same kind of experience for all the personas?
Well, probably I cannot speak on behalf of the whole eBay with confidence, but in our unit we use personas also because, well, we handle quite a specific part, which is about selling and buying cars. And that has some typical personas. For example, you have private sellers, you have professional sellers. Mm-hmm. You have first-time car buyers, you have more advanced car enthusiasts who know all the details.
Okay, so you change things up a little bit based on the kind of person that's going to be. How do, if you can talk about it, how do things differ from like your average person going and say they already have a car and they're looking to upgrade versus the first-time car buyer? How does that experience differ?
So basically, the product will have different features for different personas. So we know, for example, based also on different research techniques such as user interviews. So we receive the feedback from different sources, from like tracking mechanisms, from user interviews, right? Mm-hmm. Then basically we see what we could improve. So for example, during user interviews, for example, of users who are car newbies, so you clearly see where they struggle. And then basically it's UX and product topic, how you can basically make their experience more smooth. So one, for example, a feature idea might be that less experienced car buyer would rather search for not a specific make and model, but for category of cars, like cars that are most suitable for the first-time buyers, or the cars that are most suitable for family cars, or working cars. So, yeah. And while advanced user would need all kind of gazillion of filters to fine-tune the search, and if it's a one product, it's quite challenging. You have to address needs of all of your target audience, right? So one product being suitable for both advanced users and users who are less advanced is a good challenge to solve from UX and research perspective, right?
Yeah.
And I just realized
you can't just change one part for like a more advanced user without having it affect the other personas as well, right? So you've got to look at wow.
And I'm just curious. Well, as you're a big tech company, you have quite enough target audience to test it in the user interviews. And developers or your sysadmins themselves inside the team might provide quite a valuable feedback. So I'm just trying to understand how different that world is comparing to us.
There's probably a lot more similarities than what you think. Be it good or bad, one of the things that we found, much to my dislike, is that they're often talking about, well, what kinds of things are developers going to want to do on the website or whatever, and I go, we have 8,000 developers here in the country, or in the company that you can talk to and ask, but you don't. Okay, I don't understand why. You guys have a similar situation for eBay Auto, right? I assume most people own a vehicle. And what kinds of things would you, if you were to go on the site or use it, what kinds of things would you look for? Do you do any of that kind of internal feedback or Q&A?
Well, it's a bit tricky, as also there are market and cultural differences. So
true.
For example, I was working on Canadian experience, and to my surprise, the most popular car in Canada is Ford F-150, which you couldn't see in Europe at all.
That makes it a little bit difficult, yeah.
Therefore, yes, of course, we try to give feedback and think from the customer perspective as well. But we know that the local presence and interviewing the real customers from the area you operate is pretty important.
Yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Wow. Let's, if I can find this this one. It's not the one that I was thinking of. We'll probably come back to that one. So this one right here. What do you do for communication? Now, being that your co-located teams probably don't have much of an issue with this, but when they're talking to the other teams, this might be a thing. For us, everyone on our team is co-located. So our manager was in England. A few of us are in the United States, but in different cities, and we had some other people in Mexico, and I think we even had some people in Europe too that we were dealing with. So we had people all over the place, multiple time zones that we had to deal with. So that there was that challenge that since you've got people that are co-located and that are all in Europe, well, you don't have the time zone thing. But as far as communication goes, what do you find works out well for you?
Well, what is challenging, like, for example, designers, they are, let's say, a chapter, right? So they have to get a peer review, right? So this is another, like, interesting aspect, right? So how much designers feel being part of your feature team or product team, versus how much they feel being a part of this design chapter. So, which is, in this case, a distributed team, at least for 2 locations.
Okay. What we found is that first off that as much as we want to say it happens, it isn't necessarily always the case that great or good communication doesn't always necessarily happen organically. Sometimes you have to foster it from like a management aspect because it doesn't always build. Excuse me, it doesn't always build up from the ground up. So you kind of have to build that yourselves. Also on this one, this is a really geeky one, but the idea of verifying what it is that you receive and asking for clarification if necessary, right? It isn't necessarily always the case that when I get something from really anyone, not necessarily just a designer or another developer, but anyone really, you've got to have at least some sort of verification or maybe some clarifying questions or whatnot that you need to do. And then this one, especially for the distributed teams, right? What is it that you're using? Are you making use of all of the different options that are available for communication? And I know to some extent that makes it really difficult if you have multiple lines of communication that are being used. Like I can't just follow an email thread, right? If we're communicating via email and Skype and Slack and all the other stuff, right? There's not just one thread that you can look at to find all of that stuff. But at the same time, if I've got multiple options of communicating, then we'll find something that works out for a particular team or a particular person. What do you guys end up using? Or what do you do to foster communication? Both within the co-located teams and with the distributed teams.
Well, with local teams should be easy, right? So
sure, you walk up and talk to someone. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess nothing too special, like the remote messaging and remote calls.
One of the things that we found, and maybe you found the same thing, video chat we found makes a big difference. Not just instant messaging or a voice chat, but video chat makes a big difference because you can actually you can see the person and you can make more of a connection with them if you're able to see them face to face, and you also get a lot of the body language, some of that. The unspoken communication that we as humans do, that you lose if you're not using a video relay of some sort. Have you found that to be a problem with talking to other teams or not so much?
The remote communication piece, yeah. So for example, I see, for example, designers collaborating with each other much better than those in 2 different locations. So sometimes in their design chapter, it feels like small groups, designers here, designers there. And in the way how we split our product ownership, like some duties of who develops what, it's not always optimal that these designers communicate only to the designer who is sitting next, right? So it should be more collaborative, ideally.
Okay, so that's designers to designers. What have you noticed, or what kinds of things have worked well? I guess both. What's worked well and what's not worked as well with the designers and the developers, or even you as a manager, right? So how have you found communication cross disciplines to be different or to be useful? It's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah. I guess that would be quite specific to our setup, but
okay.
For developers, for example, our team lead or engineering manager of a single team, he's more close to tech, right? So naturally he could help facilitating communication on development level, right? Well, designer's reporting line is shared with another org unit, so their manager is not fully dedicated. And so it depends also a lot on facilitation and supporting functions. So I feel in our org, so developers have slightly more, and to my personal assessment, their communication goes a bit more flawless. And for designers, once again, they are a bit more silo in how I see it at the moment. Once again, it's not bad, right? So it's just something that not so optimal.
How are you guys communicating across teams? Is it done hierarchically, or is it kind of if you need to talk to someone, just go talk to them?
I would say probably more ad hoc than a structured way.
Okay.
Especially so for engineers and design, I'm sure designers, they use their regular meetings to some extent. Maybe they have their direct calls. For engineers, as we are quite isolated with our architecture and design choices, like micro services or components in the web part, so they don't need to talk regularly. So ad hoc, yes. So like knowledge sharing or some kind of whole hands meetings, sure.
Do you do any kind of stand-up meeting or weekly assessment meeting with the teams, or is that all kind of ad hoc as well?
So we have, for example, what we call design critique. It's for designers, show their work and get feedback from anyone. So everyone can come to this meeting and give some feedback.
Are those a scheduled thing, or does that just happen? Okay.
Yeah, it's scheduled. And basically, once you're ready with your design, you go there and you receive some feedback.
Okay. Makes sense. Fair enough. Let's see. I'm just about at the end of the slide deck on here. Is there anything else that I want to talk to? What other questions do you have, or things you would like to get my take on?
Well, I asked a lot. Hard to say for now.
Covered that.
Basically, how would you maybe make engineers interested in getting more of design, daily work, and some user experience things? How would you sell it,
Okay.
You can't just come and tell, please guys, learn it. Might be not the best way, so maybe some key selling points. What for you as an engineer would be attractive?
That is a very interesting question. For me, one of the things I've found most interesting with the design aspect is how people end up interacting with a design, and what the differences are with similar designs, but things that are different, and how that affects the way that something should be developed and written. So more of the psychological aspects I find to be more interesting. What's another one? And to a certain degree, as developers, you are isolated from the end users. Designers have a little bit more of a connection to the end users than developers do. So that when you do feedback from end users, who ends up gathering that data, or how do you go about finding that? Is that a separate team and you guys are given the data, or do you guys go out and solicit the data yourselves?
So for the interviewing part, So main part of the research, and especially like user interviews, are handled by separate people. So it's not designers themselves, but they of course take part in it, mainly listening and attending. But of course, the organizational part takes time and effort and also is a different skill set, and you have to be in that location.
Mm-hmm.
And you have probably be very close to your customer. So as we are not always in the same country as we basically operate, so
right.
User interview remotely might be even more challenging than on site.
Sure. Maybe that's something you can look at if you can bring a representative from both a design aspect and also a development aspect, because they'll have different questions, right? The designer will be looking at one thing, and a developer will be looking at something else. So you'll get different feedback. And again, that it'll, especially for the developers, it'll make that human connection a little bit more tangible for them, that the people that are actually using our product or our site are actual people. One of the things that we found, and I'm skipping a little bit here, but this one right here, maybe you've run into this one already. Maybe you'll run into it in a future idea. But the idea of a glossary, so that everyone's talking the same language. We had one where I don't really have anything to write on, but on the website we had what were referred to as cards on the website, right? Or to take the example even further, you could call it a widget, right? And you say the word widget or card or display or whatever, and if I don't know what it is that we as a team have established a card or a widget or whatever to be, then it will mean something completely different. It'll mean something different to your designers. It'll mean something different to your developers. It'll even mean something different to you, right? So this is one of the things that we found was really helpful. I said cards. We had cards, and the business thought of a card as a section of a web page that had information on it, just a short, brief description, and maybe some sort of image or video associated with it, right? UX had a very similar definition. Design abstracted it a lot more, where it's a box with stuff in it, right? And then engineering was very similar to the design. It's a CSS class that has it's a container that you put junk into, and it's displayed, right? So at that level, when you say card and you've got those 4 people in the room, all 4 of those people are understanding something completely different. So this was one of those things that when we got down to it and actually addressed it, it made a big difference. So that when we said that particular word or grouping or whatever it was, everyone was on the same page and knew what we were talking about. So that's one of those big communication things that as soon as you're able to create your own lexicon and everyone is understanding it to be the same, it makes a big difference.
Did you make any special exercises to achieve that?
We went through, and this is one of those ones where I wish Jason was here, because he was the one that actually went through the full exercise. He went through and documented every instance of a card and what it was, and we ended up with 10 or 12 different things for what a card is on the website. And as soon as we brought that to everyone's attention, we were okay, well, that's a problem. It's a lot of legwork up front. Someone's actually got to find out that this is a problem and find actual examples of it. But that was all legwork that he did over, I think it was a 2-week period. It was like a dedicated 2-week period where he went through and categorized all of these things. And then we sat down in a meeting where it was a big face-to-face meeting where we had everyone together and said, what do we want to say this thing is, right? And we went through the list of things that he had and what does this mean? And then we actually wrote it down and said, all right, in the future, whenever we talk about this particular thing, everyone understands that that's what we're talking about. And we're like, yep, that's what it is. So it's a time-consuming thing up front, but you make up for it later on when you don't have to clarify all this stuff. Or you go through the full design phase, right? And then all of a sudden it gets handed over to development and they understand it to be something different. And now you've got that disparity between the two ideas and whatnot. So that if nothing else, that and the communication aspect, I'd say are pretty big takeaways, and fairly easy to implement. I mean, this one of building the lexicon can take some time, but it's a pretty big win if you don't have that in place already.
Makes sense.
Yep. What else? Now, I know I've been talking to you mostly. The other people that are in the room, is there anything that you guys would find interesting or want to talk about? Because it's not necessarily a technical thing. It's kind of a human thing, right? Where and this is one of the interesting things for me, right? I don't speak Russian. I don't speak Ukrainian, so there's that disconnect here. But this is a human problem where there's definitely that disconnect with stuff. So, and anything else from people in the room?
Okay, about distributed team. We often have a problem with whiteboard.
Mm-hmm.
Someone want to write something on a board, and as he or she have only one camera in the room. And what do you think? How to solve this problem? Maybe you know some websites to drawing or something
Mm-hmm.
else?
Yep. So this is a little bit hot there. This is a distributed team or a collocated team?
Distributed.
Okay. One of the things that we found, and websites are, I'm drawing a blank on actual names for websites, but one of the things that we found works out really well is if you can screen share, and if you've got something on your laptop or your computer that you can draw with and just screen share that, that usually works out really well. If you're doing it from a camera perspective, I don't know. We for the most part we've junked the idea of writing on a whiteboard and sharing it with a camera that way, and we've gone completely over to websites and software to do that, and then you just end up doing a screen share so that everyone can see what it is that you're doing, and you work from that. That's what we found, for us anyway, works out really well.
It's mostly not about painting. It's like sometimes someone wants to materialize his thinking. I don't know how to say it. It's like someone at the moment want to make diagram or something like picture,
Mm-hmm.
and we often have video chat, and for example, on Jira at this moment open and writing text, but maybe I don't know, some approach to visualize. No?
It might depend on what it is that you're trying to get out of it. If it's a chart, for example, there's ASCII chart tools. You've got things like Lucid Chart, Visio. What are some of the other ones? Even some things in the Google Office suite, right? That'll work out for things like that. Or you could even load up like Microsoft Paint or whatever on Windows and draw things out that way. That would be for a little bit more of an abstract thing. But if you're looking for like a flow chart or a diagram or something like that, there are tools online that'll work out for that. If you're looking for more of the freehand drawing stuff, you're probably going to be looking at something that someone has installed on their computer and can screen share what it is that they're doing on that one. I wish Jason were here. He'd know more of those programs, being that he's the designer. He actually works with a lot of that stuff. What are some of the other tools we've been using? Was it Hotspace? Shoot, I am drawing a blank on some of the websites that we've used. But we've used other websites for like mocking up web pages or software screens, so that someone can build something up on the website, and then we can look at it and play around with it. Kind of like what you would use for as a whiteboard. So it would be like a virtual whiteboard that people can use. Some of the good ones, and I'm sorry I don't have any of the actual names for stuff, but some of the good ones will let multiple people draw at the same time. So you'll have someone that'll draw in blue, someone that'll draw in gray or black or whatever, so that you can see who's doing what. Yeah, I'm just drawing a blank for any of the actual resources, but they're out there. I'd do a search for virtual whiteboard and see what that comes up with. Any other questions? Because I think, where are we at? We got about 6 minutes left.
Just wanted to say thank you.
Okay, all right, very good. Let me go through my slides real quick and see if there is anything else. I don't think there was. Covered that. Yeah. So, yeah. This is kind of that last slide on just going back over everything. And we skipped through a lot of the slides in the deck. But the takeaways were getting rid of the wall, helping people get along with one another and understanding that we're all human. We all have similarities and differences, and that's not a bad thing. And that everyone's communicating in whichever way that they find to be most effective with their team and with broader or distributed teams, and then also that just that when you've got a meeting or whatever, or questions, take notes, verify, ask for clarification. Yep, it's this one specifically with the designers and developers. Like I said, it's more of it's a human thing. It isn't like an us versus them kind of thing, but it's definitely a human thing. Yeah. All right. I think that'll do it. Like I said, unless you guys have other questions, or if I sparked another idea or whatnot, I think we'll call it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.